All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the weekly webinar. It's great to be here with you. Looks like everybody is muted, and you're welcome to have your camera on or off as you choose. If you need closed captioning, you can use the CC button, which is at the bottom of your screen, and we are recording. So this webinar will be available later today to watch again and or to let someone else know that it's available, and the link will be in the Monday issue of the My Alliance newsletter. So those are all the housekeeping notes for today, except for I do want to remember to say thank you to all of you who came to our dementia training room last Friday. We had 93 folks there, which is wonderful. A mix of family caregivers and healthcare professionals. So lots of people, I hope, got good information about how to provide care for their loved one with cognitive change. And then on Saturday, July 19th, we had the movie, The Mama Joe Project, which I'm very honored to be a part of and on screen in. And we had 203 people attend that movie, which is fantastic. And I like to think that not everybody was there just for the popcorn, soda, and air conditioning, although those things were nice. I hope that you also found the movie to be motivating and educational and touching and all those good things. And it was a great honor to have Dr. Jeffrey Burns there to answer some great questions on the panel, and Michelle Needens from our Cognitive Care Network. And I said a few good things too, I hope. So thank you for that. And if you're interested in watching the Mama Joe movie, because you didn't make it or you'd like to see it again, watch your My Alliance newsletter, and the link will be in there. So those are all the housekeeping notes. I'm very happy to welcome our speakers for the day to talk about the hot tub study. In case you're wondering, I'm not actually in a hot tub. I just found this cool picture online to make it look like I'm in a hot tub. And the rainbow is just for added fun. So anyway, we're going to hear about hot tubs today and heat therapy from Dr. Paige Geiger and Dr. Jill Morris. Dr. Geiger is a professor of cell biology and physiology at KU Medical Center, and she's the scientific director of the KU Diabetes Institute. And she's been researching this stuff for 20 years. And I'm certain that that is why we are so much closer to figuring out how to, I don't know, get in a hot tub and solve all our problems, right? And then we have Dr. Jill Morris, who is the assistant director of the ADRC's biomarker core. And of course, we know biomarkers are things we can use to figure out what's going on in our bodies. That's a very scientific explanation, right? And then Dr. Morris is also the director of the ADRC's developmental projects program. And so they are going to talk to us with us about hot tubs today. Thank you, Dr. Geiger and Dr. Morris. All yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly. So Dr. Geiger is going to share the slides. So if you hear me saying next slide, she's actually running the show. We're going to tag team this today, just like we are sort of co-leading this really cool trial that we're excited to tell you about. So I'll start off with giving some introduction and background, and then she's going to present the results from a pilot study that we did. And then we'll go on to our actual study and just tell you a little bit about that. All right, so Paige, you want to go ahead and...
Yes. 1 second. You're not seeing that, are you, Jill?
No, I just see in the main, the main screen.
Sure. Hang on 1 second. Oh, okay. All right. We just tested this, so I don't know what's happening. Hang on, sorry.
It's all good.
No problem. We're just waiting. You know, you turn the hot tub on and you have to wait a little bit for the bubbles. Pretend that that's what's happening.
Okay, can you see it now?
We can see the, like, you know, the screen where you're working on it, like you're making the slideshow. I don't know what you call that.
There we go. There we go.
Perfect.
Okay, we're cooking.
All right.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Paige. So I just wanted to start off our talk with some good news, and that is that people are living longer. As you can see from this graph throughout the world, we're seeing large increases in life expectancy. And by 2050, it's estimated that the average life expectancy throughout the world is going to be over 80 years old. So that's really exciting. But the goal of our work is actually to ensure that we extend not just lifespan, but also health span, which is allowing people to live the longest and also healthiest lives, including being free of age-related disorders such as cognitive impairment. Right, next slide. So as you can see here, the largest segment of our population that is growing most rapidly is individuals over the age of 85. So that is the group of individuals that are at the highest risk of cognitive impairment, with the prevalence of Alzheimer's disease being 1 in 9 in individuals over 65 and 1 in 3 over 85. This comes at a large cost to Americans. We know that over $300 billion in healthcare expenses annually is spent on things like caregivers, lost work, and having people have to be in nursing homes, things like that. So it has a really large impact on our economy and just on individuals and their lives. All right, next slide. So as I mentioned, the largest risk factor for Alzheimer's disease is age. However, there's other risk factors that are both modifiable, things we can change, and not modifiable. So a well-known not modifiable risk factor that we know of is genetics. So there are certain genes that increase your risk of both early onset and late onset Alzheimer's disease. There's also environmental factors that we do have some control over that can affect brain health. Many of these risk factors impact cardiovascular or metabolic risk, things like type 2 diabetes, hypertension, and metabolic syndrome. These are all things that we know actually increase Alzheimer's risk in late life. In addition, other genetic factors such as apolipoprotein E actually also impact metabolism. So that has sort of led our group to really focus in on energy metabolism as something that we can actually intervene upon and potentially expand that health span that people have. Next slide. So when I talk about the importance of metabolism, I'm kind of talking about fuels in one way, as well as a couple other things. But broadly, glucose or sugar in your body increases when you consume a meal. And these levels are actually regulated by your liver between meals. Sugar is the main brain fuel source in healthy individuals, and decreases in brain glucose metabolism or sugar metabolism are actually evident decades before the onset of clinical Alzheimer's disease. Interestingly, we also see decreases in brain glucose metabolism with peripheral high blood sugar. So you think that actually increasing blood sugar in the periphery would be beneficial, but it's not. It actually decreases your brain glucose metabolism. So it's really important to understand this, because generating energy from glucose is needed for all processes that keep your brain functioning normally. This includes keeping proteins from aggregating, which is the hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. Molecules in your brain that help limit this aggregation are called heat shock proteins, and these proteins are actually increased in response to things like both heat and exercise. So you can see here on the right-hand side, those proteins that we know of, that we call them neuropathological hallmarks of Alzheimer's. They're amyloid beta and tau, tau tangles. Those things can actually be decreased by the upregulation of heat shock proteins. Next slide. So two interventions that our labs have been particularly interested in are exercise and heat therapy. These look pretty different from the outside. If you look at this figure, you have a normal gym, and then you have this beautiful geothermal pool in Iceland. This is the Blue Lagoon. I'd love to do a trial there, but we have some, economic things to consider. But we think that both physical exercise and heat therapy share some similar physiological effects that are particularly relevant to brain health. Next slide. And so when I say that, I'm talking about how both exercise and heat therapy engage what I consider the three key systems that impact metabolism and brain health, which is fuel use, fuel supply, and then the engine that actually drives your brain, which is your mitochondria. So if you think about your brain as a car, your car needs fuel. It needs to be able to get the fuel to the right place to actually be combusted, and you have to have the engine. And if you don't have any one of those components, your car is not going to be able to go anywhere. Your brain is sort of similar. Your brain needs energy, it needs fuel, which can be sugar. And then the two other things that the brain really likes are lactate and ketones, which are increased by things like exercise and fasting. It needs a good fuel supply, a good vascular system, and it needs the mitochondria to be intact. And that is, if you remember mitochondria, they're the powerhouse of the cell. So they're what's actually used when the fuel is supplied through the vascular system. That's where the energy is made. So our work focuses on targeting these systems to improve brain health. And we think that both exercise and heat therapy can impact all of these systems simultaneously. So now Dr. Geiger is going to take over and talk to you a little bit more about heat therapy and the findings of our pilot study.
All right, thank you, Dr. Morris. You did a great job of getting the stage set in terms of the pathology of Alzheimer's disease and why we're studying the importance of brain health, and also the need to understand how the brain responds to exercise and why metabolism of the brain is so important. And so if we understand that exercise is so beneficial, well, then why are we not just sticking with that as an intervention? Why even consider the possibility of this heat therapy intervention? And the important reason is actually that a lot of individuals cannot do enough exercise to get the benefits that we know are there for the brain. So maybe an acute injury, or if you're recovering from surgery, if you have restrictions to movement, or secondary complications to chronic disease, things like aging, or importantly, cognitive impairments. And so it's very important that we consider other alternatives to exercise and, things that are not necessarily just pharmacological or taking a drug. And so real quickly, I'll paint you a picture for some of the things that we think heat does and how it can compare to exercise. I like to tell people to imagine that you're sitting in a hot tub. And maybe that's not too hard to imagine on a day like today when we're having such a heat wave. But you're sitting in a hot tub, and what begins to happen is you get warm, you begin to sweat, your heart rate increases, and you have changes in your blood flow. And now think back to the last time you went for a walk, or even went to the gym or worked in your garden, and a lot of those same changes to your body, those physiological changes, occurred in response to exercise. So just keep that in your mind as we talk about the specifics of this particular approach and how heat and exercise really aren't that dissimilar in terms of the way the body responds. And something I want to address at this point is why this work is so important to me. I always like to talk about this in my presentations, particularly to anyone associated with the KU Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. All of you here probably either know or love someone who is impacted by Alzheimer's disease. That includes me as well. This is a picture of my mother and her three granddaughters, one of whom is my daughter. And my mom was diagnosed with dementia and Alzheimer's disease 10 years ago. And she sees Dr. Burns at the Memory Clinic here on the KU campus. And we're very fortunate to have the resources of the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. And she's had a very slow cognitive decline over the last decade. We've had many wonderful moments in time as a family that I'm very grateful for. But I just think it's important to mention that this is a disease that impacts so many families and lives, and we're doing everything we can here at the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center to prevent that and to take care of everyone impacted by Alzheimer's disease. So I've been studying heat therapy for 20 years, and in the last 10 years, I've turned my attention to how it could potentially prevent Alzheimer's disease. And so that's really where this project has come from, in my collaboration with Dr. Morris, who is really the expert in the neurology and the neuroscience behind this study. So what is it that we're interested in? We call our study FIGHT AD, which is a lot easier to say than feasibility of improving glycemic control via heat therapy in individuals at risk for Alzheimer's disease. That's the long version. The FIGHT AD is much easier to say. And what we're really interested in is seeing if we can regulate blood glucose. Again, remember Dr. Morris talked about the glucose is the fuel that the brain uses and that the body uses to move around and get through our daily activity. If heat can can regulate those changes in glucose, then perhaps we can ward off some of those metabolic and cardiovascular effects that lead to increased risk of Alzheimer's disease. And so we're interested in how that occurs in the circulation, in the blood, and also in the brain. And so I'll tell you a little bit about what our intervention looks like. This was the study timeline for our prior pilot study, which we completed just this past year. It was a 4-week heat therapy intervention where first our individual subjects would come in and have some initial baseline measures done, like heart rate and blood pressure, and we would do a glucose tolerance test where each individual would ingest a sugary substance, and then we would look at the response of the body to that glucose over time. And then they would come in and do an MRI, so looking at brain blood flow with that. And then they would begin the hot tub interventions, which includes 3 times a week for 4 weeks. And so some of the things that we measure during that time, we look at heart rate and blood pressure. We also measure core body temperature by ingestion of a temperature pill. And this intervention is actually 45 minutes long. It takes about 20 minutes to raise core body temperature 1 degree Celsius, which is what we think is necessary for some of these beneficial effects of heat. And then the individual can sit for another 25 minutes in the hot tub over the total of a 45-minute period. So initially, the individual is immersed up to the shoulder in the water. And then after that body temperature increases, the individual sits up a little higher. We put a fan on, and you can drink water throughout. And so this is really a much more comfortable stage of the intervention. And then after that, 3 times a week for 4 weeks, we bring the individuals back in for follow-up visits that resemble those initial visits where we get blood draws and heart rate and do a follow-up MRI. As I mentioned, this is what it looks like. We have 2 hot tubs on our clinical research campus now, and they are in 2 separate rooms, and Dr. Morris will talk about that in just a minute. But initially, individuals come in, we get resting values, and then they sit in the hot tub, and we continue to monitor vitals and comfort levels throughout the 45-minute intervention. In our pilot study, we had a total of 19 subjects. We had an average age of 71, and we had 50% men and 50% women in this study. We had a broad background of race for each of these individuals that represents what we see in the greater Wyandotte County area. And we also assess a genetic risk for Alzheimer's disease and whether or not individuals have the ApoE4 gene, which places individuals at a higher risk for Alzheimer's disease. We don't yet know what that genetic risk, how it interacts with these heat interventions, but it's something that we are keeping track of as we go forward to hopefully gain greater understanding throughout the course of our studies. So some initial findings from our pilot, we looked at changes in blood pressure with heat therapy. And on the left here in figure A, you can see changes in resting mean arterial pressure, which is sort of an average of your systolic and diastolic blood pressure from the beginning of our intervention, so before any heat, and at the end of the 4-week intervention. And each one of these circles represents a different individual in our study. And you can see that for the most part, blood pressure declined over the course of the 4-week study. And this is actually a significant clinical change in blood pressure, much like what you would see with a 4-week exercise intervention. So very important, significant change in blood pressure. And then, as you can see, this is on the right, a figure showing how that blood pressure changes over time while they're in the hot tub over the 45 minutes. And you can see from session 1 up here in the circles to session 12 in the squares, that blood pressure decreases across that time spectrum on average for all our individuals in the study. Another important thing that we looked at in our pilot study was how the brain is responding to the heat intervention. And so we looked at brain blood flow, and we used MRI measures to do this. And so here you can see changes in brain blood flow on average for each one of our subjects, represented by these circles. And we saw overall an increase in brain blood flow in response to the heat. Now, what's interesting, and we don't really know what to make of yet, is that we saw some sex differences in this response. And so when we break this down for men and women, and these are just different regions of the brain here across the bottom. But what's interesting here is that in terms of the change in brain blood flow, we saw an increase in brain blood flow with the heat in men and a decrease in brain blood flow in the women. Now, important to note is that women have a higher resting brain blood flow to start with. So in some ways, it's as if the women were up here and the men were a little lower, and they kind of calibrated throughout the 4-week intervention. We don't know if this will hold in a longer intervention or what this means, but we're following this up with our larger study, which Dr. Morris will talk about in a minute, to try to really understand what's happening here. So something that we thought was really important to obtain with our initial pilot study was, how do people respond to the heat, and particularly this population of 65 and older? Do they tolerate the heat? Do they find it pleasurable? Do they enjoy it, or do they hate it? You know, what is the likelihood that people are going to want to be in the study and maybe want to follow this type of intervention in the future? And so we collected surveys of all our participants, and you can see a few of them written here. The study team was nice, and I enjoyed the study, enjoyed talking to everyone. There's a lot of time sitting in the hot tub where you can just chat and have conversations, so that's important. And overall, though, you can see that these were very positive comments that we got, where people enjoyed it. For the most part, people told us they didn't want it to end, that they really felt good as a result of these interventions. And you can see that out of 216 total visits for all 19 of our subjects, there were only 8 missed visits over that 4-week intervention. And this amounts to a 96% adherence for the study. So that's overall really high, and suggests that this is an intervention that not only is effective, but is palatable, or people are willing to participate in the future, which we're really excited about. We have a new paper as a result of that pilot that we published just this past year in January. And here it is, the title, the FIGHT-AD, a pilot study. So all that information that I just presented to you can be found online from our most recent publication. We're very proud of that. And then I'm just going to wrap up here with, sort of these major takeaways. I hope that by presenting this data and our results to you, that you can start to see that what we think is a truly viable alternative for exercise for individuals that are at risk for Alzheimer's disease, as well as other chronic diseases, is this approach to heat therapy. We didn't talk a lot today about what we think is happening in terms of mechanism, but as Dr. Morris mentioned, these heat shock proteins are what we think are acting on the cellular level to improve glucose and blood pressure, decrease inflammation, and act on those powerhouses of energy, those mitochondria. And so we think there are also numerous other benefits to these heat therapy interventions, and we can talk about other approaches as well. There's a lot of research going on right now in terms of using sauna, using isolated tissue heat to, say, for example, just heat the legs or a particular muscle. So there's lots of different ways to apply this heat, and we're really excited that there are more and more individuals in the field that are pursuing these different avenues. And I like to put this picture in here. This was actually just discovered in this past year. I don't know if you heard, but there was a recent new archaeological discovery at Pompeii, which is thousands of years old, but just recently they unearthed a new grand palace within the ruins of the volcanic ashes. And within the basement of this sort of palatial home, they found what they think was early evidence of a spa or a sauna. And I thought that was fascinating. And it's something to continue to think about, that this is an approach, an ancient therapy that's been around for thousands of years. And, we just need to rethink it to potentially fight all our modern diseases. So with that, I am going to turn it back over to Dr. Morris to talk about what we have going on right now in our current study.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Dr. Geiger. That was great. Just very briefly, I wanted to introduce you to our current study. It is also called Fight AD. We call it the main study because it's essentially different in a few key ways. Instead of just the 4-week intervention for the pilot study, we are trying a longer intervention time of 10 weeks. So a little over double the intervention length. We're also adding a second comparison group. We're doing essentially what we call hot versus warm water. So the hot water group will be exactly what we did in the pilot study. And then we have a warm water group that is designed to specifically really mimic the hydrostatic effects that you get from just being submerged in water. So there are effects on blood pressure from just being in a body of water. So we really kind of want to understand at a molecular level what is happening and the changes that are happening and what they track with that is clinically relevant. We're also doing some additional outcomes related to brain glucose metabolisms, and we'll have better power to understand the imaging outcomes that we thought were really interesting from our pilot study that were somewhat unexpected with the males and the female individuals kind of normalizing. We think that that might be due to potentially some better autoregulation, which is essentially the ability of the brain to maintain a constant blood flow. It's not necessarily that increased is good or decreased is bad. It's your brain wants to stay the same no matter what when your blood pressure is changing and things like that. So we'll have a lot better opportunity to understand those things in the main study. Next slide. So just briefly, I wanted to mention the inclusion criteria for this new trial. We are focused on individuals who do not have any cognitive impairment at this time, that are 65 years or older. If you're female, postmenopausal, on stable medication doses for about 1 month, and if you have a history or current diagnosis of metabolic disease, something like diabetes or metabolic syndrome or hypertension. So there's additional exclusion criteria for the study as well. And those are actually available. Our recruitment team would be able to tell individuals about it. In addition, this study is available on clinicaltrials.gov, which is a website where you can go and search available clinical trials in your area, and it has all of the information on those trials. Next slide. And then I just briefly wanted to mention next steps. Some of the future directions that we're really interested in is, as I mentioned, we're focused on people who have no cognitive impairment at the moment, but we would love to translate this and see if we can actually use this in individuals who have early indications of cognitive decline to see if we can slow that decline in those populations. We needed to really show that we could do it in cognitively healthy individuals first, but that is the next step. We're interested in other methods or modalities of heat therapy, as Dr. Geiger mentioned. We get a lot of questions about spa therapy, and there are groups that are doing things like lower leg heating. You have a lot of vasculature that runs through your legs, so it makes a lot of sense that even heating certain parts of your body might have good effects as well. We can also think about looking at different lengths of time in terms of how many sessions per week, or is it needed to be effective, and are there other temperatures that we can look at? But those are sort of the next steps that we're thinking of. And that's pretty much all I had for today. So we just want to thank our amazing team. It takes a lot of individuals to pull off this study, the NIH for research support, and most of all, our research participants. They are absolutely incredible. Dr. Geiger and I are both blinded to the participants and the groups and everything to maintain full validity of this randomized controlled trial, but I wish I could go and see every participant and tell them thank you. As soon as the study's over, we will be so excited to do that. But Dr. Geiger, you want to say anything else?
No, that's all. I think just thank you all for your involvement and interest in research. And we cannot do these studies without people like you to be involved in the studies or to pass the word along. And we're incredibly grateful for that. I will show on this last slide, we have a link here to more information about the study if you are interested in that. And we will also put this link in the chat so that you can find that and find out if you're eligible, or just more information to pass on to family and friends that you think might want to benefit from this new information. So I'm going to stop our share, and then if Kelly, if you wanted to show your slide again or anything, we could do that. And I know hopefully we have some questions.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much. We have some great questions in the chat. First, I'll point you to the very most recent thing in the chat, which is me putting that link. So folks, feel free to take that link. It is case sensitive, I'm pretty sure. So make sure you copy it down exactly as you see it in the chat. And you'll get our study flyer and more information. So then back up to these great questions. The first one is if you have any thoughts about a resistance pool, which is done in a hot tub.
So I think what this individual might be referring to is one of these pools that has a current, so you can kind of swim against them, I believe. So getting some exercise at the same time. I think in terms of heat, that might. So I do think that there is a potential to combine heat and exercise, but in a healthy way, because we think the mechanisms are slightly different. So there's a way to get those benefits sort of in an additive way. I would caution against, exercises, of course, and additional exertion, and in adding that to the heat. If you went and did a hot yoga class, it's a lot more taxing on the body than just yoga alone. So keep that in mind. But yes, I think our ultimate goal is the heat could be a way to get people back to exercise or exercising in a way that they couldn't before. And then you add in the exercise and you maintain health with exercise and heat, some combination of that. So maybe 2 exercise sessions a week and 1 heat session. Or there's even been some studies done in elite athletes that do a heat session at the end of a training exercise, and it actually boosts their endurance. So there is a lot of ways that we can combine heat and exercise. We don't yet have a lot of research doing that yet, so I'm cautious to say anything about timing or heat or temperature or anything at this point. But I would think of them as both being beneficial, but in moderation, working them as if they are equally taxing. And so you wouldn't want to do 2 exercise sessions in the same day. You wouldn't want to do the heat and the exercise together.
You all heard Dr. Geiger said you don't have to do 2 exercise sessions in one day. And thank you. I had that same question about whether heat plus exercise would be like an even greater effect. So thank you for asking and answering that. Our next question is whether participants can have PET scans instead of an MRI.
Yeah, I can answer that one. So for the main study that we're doing, we are actually doing both. So for the initial pilot study, we only did MRI. They give unique information. So the MRI is going to give brain structure that we need to interpret the PET scan. For the PET scan, we do an FDG PET scan, which is a specific scan for measuring brain glucose metabolism. So this has never been done before. This is going to be a novel finding for the world. So we're very excited about that. But it does require individuals to have both a PET scan and an MRI.
Gotcha. Okay. So now we have someone who's wondering, are there current lower leg heat therapies that can be utilized beyond the study?
Do you want to take that one, Dr. Morris?
If you can, I don't know if you want to talk about Steve's work.
Yeah, so there's a particular group that's at the University of North Texas that is looking at lower leg heating to lower blood pressure. And so they actually are using, it's a home-based intervention. They are using these buckets that look like, I don't know if any of you remember these sharper image type buckets that you could put your feet in, almost like a water massage type deal. They are using those type of systems. They send them home with their subjects. They fill them with warm water and they sit in with their feet up to their knees for like 45 minutes at a time. And that study has shown dramatic effects on blood pressure, which I think is really exciting. And so there are things like that. And you don't have to get that particular bucket. You could put your feet in a bath or something like that. I do think we don't know a lot about the timing and who that especially, what groups would especially benefit from that. For example, it may not be as robust as an effect as you get with the whole body immersion. So there's more information that we need to know about that, but that's just to give you an idea of what that study looks like and how it can be used at home.
Nice, nice. Okay, we've got a couple more questions I actually think go really well together, and they are, one, can you give some insight on infrared saunas, and do you plan on doing a study about those? And the question right after that is about being a member of HotWorks, which I think is maybe similar to an infrared sauna. Tell me if I'm wrong. And all the exercises are in Ooh, wait, temps between 100 and 123 degrees for 15 to 35 minutes, and whether that qualifies as heat therapy. And also, I will add to that, when I go outside and it's 100 degrees, and if I just turn in a circle, can I say that I did my exercise for the day? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so these are all such great questions. So, just like you think of exercise as being a walk on a treadmill, a yoga session, a weightlifting session, right? Those are all different types of exercise. All of these sauna, hot tub, lower leg immersion, those are all different types of heat therapy. So, there's more and less research on certain types. There are a lot of people looking at what we call Finnish sauna, which is from Finland, the practice of using sauna, which is a dry heat. That has been practiced for a long time in Norwegian countries, for example, and there's a lot of research on how they are protected from dementia, for example, because they have used those saunas throughout their lifetime in that particular country. So that's one approach. The far infrared sauna, which is what you see more and more, you can even buy one at Costco now, those type of approaches. The timing and the temperature are different for those, and we don't have a lot of real hard data on those, but it's coming. I just reviewed a paper that compared hot tub, sauna, dry sauna, and far infrared sauna and looked at how long do you have to sit in them and what temperatures do they need to be. And so that research is really coming. And we can pass on information to people in terms of what some of those details are. But I would say, the field is really exploding in terms of trying to get at that. Same thing with in terms of walking outside or a warm bath. I think all of those are exposure to heat for short periods of time that could sort of jumpstart the system, just like a short walk or working in your garden can be beneficial. So I think all of those things could have potential benefit. And yes, you can count those.
Good answer. Thank you. I think that might help a lot of us feel, I'll speak for myself, a lot of me feel like, okay, I'll go take a walk in my neighborhood, even though it's 1 million degrees outside, because it's good for my brain. So thank you. We have one last question in the chat, and that is the next study up and ready to enroll?
Yeah, we are enrolling for our current study. So please, if you are interested and you think you might be eligible based on some of the inclusion criteria we listed at the end, please reach out and we'll be more than happy to get you to the right place to be considered for participation.
Wonderful. I'm putting that phone number in the chat. And you can also, unless that's not what they should do. Sorry, I didn't even realize that. Dr. Morris or Dr. Geiger, is there a different way to contact you than our main research number?
You could call the main research number. I think that there is also, yeah, that's fine. Just say that you're interested in the Fight AD study.
Okay. So I'll finish typing that. And then you can look in the chat for the link.
I do want to add, Kelly, real quick.
Yeah.
Just a note of precaution, as we mentioned, our research intervention is 45 minutes in the hot tub. The hot tub is set at 104 degrees Fahrenheit, which is what you would see in a commercial hot tub if you went to a gym or a hotel or something like that. That is a very long intervention time. It's very heavily supervised with our research staff, with a medical monitor on site. We don't want anyone going out and trying to do that on their own. I would say 5 to 10 minutes, very short bouts to kind of adjust over time and see how you feel, just like you would check with your doctor before you started a new exercise routine. We actually get a physician clearance for our studies for anyone that is involved. And so we make sure that we're doing this in a very safe way. So just keep that in mind. We want everyone to be cautious, but also to start to think about heat as another way of improving health, but in a very kind of preliminary way of dipping a toe in, if you will.
Speaking of dipping a toe in, do participants bring their own swimming attire?
Yes, you will bring your own swimming attire. You do get a little appreciation package when you participate, which has a wet bag for your stuff, a towel that says Fight AD, a water bottle, things like that. So we do give you some of the things that you will need, and we provide extra towels and things like that. But as for like your swimsuit, we would,
Nice.
yeah, ask you to bring it.
Wow, so exciting. I'll call you back in 16 years when I'm eligible for this study. All you who are lucky enough to maybe qualify now, I strongly encourage you. It sounds amazing for so many reasons. Thank you, Dr. Geiger and Dr. Morris, for a wonderful webinar. I've been talking up your study, and now I have even more things to say when I go out and about and help recruit folks for participation. So thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Next week, we have a hybrid weekly webinar. So we will be on Zoom, but we also, for those of you who can come to our office, will be in person at the KU Clinical Research Center, which is also where the hot tubs are. I think that's right. I'm not going to say that the hot tubs are right there, but the hot tubs are right there. So next week at 2 o'clock, you can join us in person on Shawnee Mission Parkway, 4350 Shawnee Mission Parkway. That's in Fairway, right where Johnson Drive and Shawnee Mission Parkway sort of separate from each other. Parking is plentiful and easy right in front of the building. So come right inside, come to the Fairway Auditorium. We will have snacks. We will have Dr. Elizabeth Andes, who is a retired geriatrician. She's a fantastic speaker. I heard her about a month ago. Yes, you can come live and in person. And I heard Dr. Andes talk about how to talk to your doctor about dementia. So if you have questions for yourself or a loved one, if you have a diagnosis, if you're wondering what's going on, what do I do next, and you're not sure what to say to your doctor, Dr. Andes is going to give us some tips about that. And she is fantastic. I heard her, like I said, I heard her in person about a month ago, and I said, you have to come and talk to the My Alliance webinar folks. So she agreed. So if you can come in person, we'll be so happy to see you. There is a registration form in the My Alliance newsletter that will help. If you fill that out, that'll help me to know how many chairs to set up. But if you don't decide until that day, you can still just come. Or you can watch on Zoom, but only if you live more than driving distance away. No, you can watch on Zoom anytime. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Dr. Geiger, Dr. Morris, excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to upload this and it'll be on YouTube later today. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.